If Mom can't remember things clearly anymore, no one will blame us for applying for guardianship. I froze behind the half-closed door. My suitcase still tagged from the flight I'd just canceled to come back for a will. Inside, my son Spencer's voice was calm, like he was talking about taxes, not plotting to take away his mother's right to live. Naomi, his wife, spoke softly but clearly. Attorney Carr said if we file early, she won't be able to pull back the assets. I clenched the keys in my hand, the cold sinking into my chest. The boy who once held my hand through a fever was now whispering an idea to turn his mother into someone powerless. I didn't cry. I just opened my phone, hit record, and shut the suitcase. The flight to Florida was postponed indefinitely. Because tonight, before they file their first form, I'm going to rewrite this whole play, and the victim will no longer be me. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Loretta Myers, 65, widowed for 6 years, living alone in a small house on the edge of Madison, Wisconsin. I spent my life in archives at the Dane County Historical Museum. People still call me Mrs. Myers from the stacks, because I remember where every manuscript, every envelope, every signature lives, like each one has its own soul. I'm not rich, but I live neatly, and I've always believed honesty and order keep life running steady. I raised Spencer on that belief that if you work hard and live straight, you never have to lie to anyone. But standing behind that door, hearing him map out how to legitimize stripping his own mother's personhood, I understood. There are things you can preserve your whole life and still never preserve the human heart. I turned the car around. The GPS still showed the route to the airport, but I shut it off and let the road pull me back toward Maplewood, where my house sits under old maples, where everything used to be peaceful to the point of dull. I parked under the same tree, as every year, the spot where Arthur, my husband, liked to wash the car on Saturday mornings. The difference is, this year he's been gone 6 years, and our only son is working to take the rest of me too. I stepped out without locking the door. My footsteps on the stone path sounded dry and hard. From the dining room came a hush of voices, trailing into the study. I pressed against the wall and peered through a sliver of light. Spencer was on speaker, eyes pinned to a pile of papers. A name came through clearly: Rudy Carr, a man's voice, low, professional, distant. First step is to file for a capacity assessment. If there are medical notes, even better. How old is she? 65. Good. With a few behavior notes, we can get temporary guardianship for the son. I felt my blood go cold, each heartbeat like a hammer in my skull. I realized this wasn't a moment of bad judgment. This was a prepared plan, with legal advice and a clear goal: turn me into a senile old woman so they could control the money. I stepped back half a pace and touched the wall to steady myself. The mother in me wanted to walk in and shout, "What are you doing?" But I stopped myself. No, not now. Not without knowing how far they've gone. I chose intentional silence. I moved quietly to the kitchen, opened the oak china cabinet where I'd hidden a secondary safe behind the dish shelves. The key was still in the pocket of an old raincoat. I slid it in, turned it, and heard a tiny click that made my heart skip. Inside was Arthur Myers' original will, the one I've always kept hidden, leaving only a copy for Spencer. Arthur once said, "If I'm not here, don't let anyone sign for you, not even our son." Paper only tells the truth when you hold it yourself. I pulled out the thick envelope and looked at Arthur's familiar handwriting, the same hand he used for notes to me. Part of me wanted to cry. The other part had never been clearer. I slipped the envelope into my bag, along with the keys and the phone that was still recording. As I headed out, I glanced down the hall. Spencer was still on with Rudy Carr, walking and scribbling in a notebook. Naomi stood with arms crossed, eyes cool, like an outsider. I slipped out like a shadow so light the floorboards didn't speak. The door eased shut behind me, the hinge giving a small scrape and ending punctuation to the role of the gentle mother I'd tried to hold. Outside, the late winter Wisconsin wind cut through skin. I got in the car and took a long breath. On the passenger seat was the unopened suitcase clothes, a book, and a ticket to Florida. I turned on the cabin light and stared at today's date on the ticket. I gave a thin smile. "No, Loretta," I told myself. "Your trip isn't to Florida. It starts right here." I started the engine without turning on the radio. The hum in the quiet sounded like a promise. No explanations, no begging, just action. I drove through downtown, holiday lights still dangling off porches, twinkling in the rear view. Madison looked as calm as ever, but for me, everything had changed. I didn't know my first move yet, only that when people think I'm weak, that's when I have to be stronger than ever. I didn't go back to the motel, and I didn't call anyone. I drove straight to the Dane County Historical Museum, where I'd spent over 3 decades. People still call me Mrs. Myers from the archives. There, I learned to read between lines, and that evidence always speaks if you preserve it right. I parked behind the old red brick building, showed my retiree ID to the guard, and borrowed a guest pass. They still remembered me. "Hi, Miss Loretta. Still love the smell of old paper?" I just smiled. In the stacks, paper, wood, and paste glue mixed into a scent that feels like myself. I sat at my old desk, flipped on the lamp, and wrote a plan. 1. Photocopy the original will. 2. Contact a Mater, trustworthy attorney, not through Spencer. 3. Review all account changes over the last 6 months. 4. Gather evidence, audio, paperwork, behaviors. 5. Stay silent until everything is sealed tight. I stared at the list and wondered when I started needing a strategy to protect myself from my own child. Next to me sat the old clock. Arthur gave me the hour hand, gliding slow and steady. Wind hissed at the windows, carrying the Wisconsin cold, and I realized I wasn't shaking at all. By the time I left the museum, dusk had laid a deep gold over the city. I drove toward Lake Monona, the water throwing back broken glass light. I parked, opened my phone, and replayed the first recording. Spencer's voice came through, clear and firm, without a stutter. "If Mom can't remember things clearly anymore, no one will blame us for applying for guardianship." I closed my eyes and felt each word prick like pins in my palm. Then I smiled the smile of someone who knows the first piece of evidence is in hand. I said to myself, low and even, "Okay, Spencer. If you want to fight with paperwork, then I'll let the paperwork speak for me." I started the car and checked the mirror. The lights of my house glowed far off, but that light wasn't home anymore. It was the first stage of a fight I never thought I'd have to enter. And I knew when morning comes, the victim won't be me. I sat for a few more minutes, letting the Monona wind slip through the cracked window. It carried a metallic chill, a damp smell, and a faint trace of old paper from the brick building behind me. That smell, the smell of archives, of time, settles me. Maybe only in the world of documents, labels, and chain of custody do I feel whole. I am Loretta Myers, registrar at the Dane County Historical Museum for over 30 years. My job was to guard what others called the past. Letters, wills, maps, journals, fragile things that hold entire lives. At 65, it's bitterly funny that I have to apply that exact workflow to my own life. I took a long breath and carried my bag inside. The basement hallway was still lit by warm, dim tubes, the light skimming cracks on the wall like the grain of memory. I passed the heavy wooden door with the brass plate, archives, staff only, now a little darker. Inside, paste glue and oak welcomed me like an old friend. This space hasn't changed. Orderly, quiet, honest. No pretending here. No son talking guardianship, no young wife calculating inheritance, just paper, ink, and proof. I went to the back table by the cabinet, the place I'd spent thousands of hours accessioning donations. My hand rested on the wood, still smooth, still warm like skin. I opened my bag and took out the envelope with Arthur's original will. The instant the paper hit the lamp's glow, I felt like he was here, standing behind me, watching me work just like he used to. I opened the envelope carefully, pulled out each sheet, and put them in numbered order. On top sat the notes Arthur once wrote by hand, which I typed up for him in 2016. He told me, "We need to be clear, Loretta. Black and white is the only thing that protects people when feelings change." I read that line again, my chest tight. Under executor, my name was bold, black, straight. Arthur even underlined it in red, like he wanted to make sure no one, not even his son, could miss it. Along the margin of the last page was a slanted note in his hand, the ink slightly smudged. "Do not grant full authority to our son without an independent evaluation. No matter what, Loretta must be the final approval." I put my fingers on it, a slight tremor in my tips. Had he seen this coming years ago? Maybe Arthur understood Spencer better than I did. And I, the mother who covered for him and went soft, was the last to see. I closed my eyes for a second, then opened my notebook and wrote, "Copy the entire will. Find a new, independent lawyer. Audit all account changes in the last 6 months. No confrontation, only collection. Every document needs a timestamp and storage location." I set the pen down and drew a long breath. In this archive, I wasn't a betrayed mother anymore. I was a custodian of evidence, like I've always been. I know how to handle truth: number, copy, store, seal. A document only has value if it's preserved correctly, just like justice only exists when proven by evidence, not by words. I powered up the old scanner, squared each page, and listened to its soft grind. I labeled each file: Arthur Will Original, PDF, Scan by Loretta, timestamp, 8:47 p.m. I created a new folder on my external drive. Evidence Log 1. In the description I typed, "First verified document, original last will and testament of Arthur Myers. Executor, Loretta Myers. Valid until revoked." At the bottom, I added, "Evidence duplicated by the direct party. No third party." These steps are muscle memory now. Every move exact, like handling a priceless donation. I could hear my old professor in my head. Chain of custody is the lifeline of evidence. One slip, and the truth collapses. I can't slip, not this time. When the screen flashed "Scan complete," I plugged in a USB and made another copy titled "Personal Backup." Then I used my phone to take photos of the process from the table corner to the wall clock to create secondary proof of time and place. For each photo I added, "Proof of chain, Loretta Myers, Dane County Historical Museum, December 12th, 8:53 p.m. For the first time in months, my heartbeat felt steady and justified. I looked around. Shelf after shelf to the ceiling, boxes labeled by year and topic, all familiar. I remembered hundreds of late nights here, debating whether to repair a torn letter or leave time's mark. We used to say the truth doesn't need to be pretty, it just needs to exist. That's what I'm doing now, preserving a truth my own son is trying to bend. I checked the clock. After 9. Security would lock up soon. I put the original into a moisture-proof sleeve, sealed it, and slid it into my bag. I opened my phone and wrote a new note. December 12th, first step done. Original evidence duplicated. No notifications sent. I read it back and locked the screen. At the door, I turned for one last look at the dark wood frame. I remembered my first day. Arthur brought a lunchbox and said, "You picked right, no one protects the past like you." Back then, I thought he meant old letters or oil paintings. I didn't know that 30 years later, I'd be protecting my own past from the hands of the person I brought into this world. I switched off the lights and stepped into the hall. My heels clicked, calm and even. At the end, the glass showed a small woman with a straight back, gray hair, and bright eyes. Maybe getting older isn't about getting weaker, it's about being less afraid. Cold air hit when I pushed outside, but I didn't lift my collar. The wind cleared my head. On the steps, I looked down at my car under the maple, the streetlight honeying the hood. I realized I no longer felt old, small, or threatened. I had a plan, a path. Most of all, I had a truth under proper custody, right process, right rules, exactly as a true registrar would do. I went down, opened the car, set the bag carefully, and started the engine. In the rear view, the brick building shrank to a warm pin of light in the Wisconsin mist. I spoke softly to myself, or maybe to Arthur. Don't worry. I still remember the workflow. And I drove toward the lights ahead where the next step was waiting. On the way home, I turned on the heat and still felt cold. Not from Madison's night wind or the first flakes tapping the glass, but from the truth forming in my mind, the truth I should have seen long ago. When you're betrayed, the first shock isn't the words, it's realizing all the warning signs were always there, and you chose to look away. I remembered the months after Arthur died. Spencer had just been promoted. Naomi was opening a home goods shop. They visited often, bringing food, flowers, and perfectly timed care. I thought it was love. Looking back now, each gesture was a calculated test. The first odd thing was Spencer switching accountants on his own. Our old guy, Mr. Patterson, had handled the family more than 2 decades. One afternoon, Spencer showed up with a polite smile, laid a packet on the table, and said gently, "Mom, I think Mr. Patterson's too old, keeps making mistakes. I know a younger firm that's quick. Just sign here, it's only changing the billing address." I signed, didn't read closely. I even joked, "You really look out for me." I didn't know that signature opened the door for Spencer to control the joint accounts. After that, all tax notices and bank statements went to an inbox Spencer set up for Mom. I didn't push back. I was tired, sorting Arthur's things, and didn't have the stomach for cold figures. Then one day, I found the property taxes were on auto pay. I'd never authorized it, but the bill said auto pay, initiated by authorized party. When I called the office, the clerk asked, "Mrs. Myers, that's your son, right?" He sent a notarized authorization. "We thought you knew." I didn't remember signing anything. Instead of digging in, I gave a weak laugh. I must have forgotten. I told myself Spencer just wanted to help. Now I see each explanation like shards of mirror reflecting the whole plan. About 6 months later, Naomi started nudging me toward a memory support service. Honey in her voice. "You know, at your age, everyone needs little reminders. We just want you comfortable, not having to remember too much." They sent a young woman who called herself an elder care coordinator. She logged everything, meds, appointments, even my walk times. I felt smothered, but out of politeness, I let her do it. I learned later every note fed straight to Spencer, a tidy behavior observation report. Naomi was slicker. She installed a pill reminder app on my phone to help you not forget. Soon, I noticed the account was tied to her email, and she held the password. When I asked, she laughed. "Don't worry, I remember better than you." I laughed too, that easy laugh of someone who thinks she's still in control. I didn't know those pill boxes would later be used to prove signs of forgetfulness. One fall evening last year, Spencer brought a glossy brochure for a senior community. He set it down, voice so gentle it sounded fake. "Take a look, Mom. They have gardens, a reading room, even yoga. We think you might be happier with friends your age." I remember staying quiet. The pictures showed smiling seniors in a green lawn, honeyed sunshine. Their eyes were empty. I didn't like it. Spencer mistook my silence for agreement. I flipped pages, smelled the heavy ink, and shut it. Back then, I still believed it was just overdone concern. But the last dinner before my flight, the night I thought was ordinary, was the clearest sign. Naomi cooked wine-braised ham, Spencer queued up jazz, like a warm family night. Only the conversation bent strange. "Do you remember what day it is?" Naomi asked lightly. "Thursday, if I'm not wrong." "Oh no, it's Tuesday." Spencer chuckled. "Mom, you mix it up a lot lately." I laughed along, but it felt like a door closing. Now I know they were testing recording my reactions, every glance and answer, so weeks later they could use it as evidence. I wasn't angry then, just tired. Tired from the years alone, from life losing its rhythm. Arthur gone, I slowed down, and they the young equated slower with incapable. I thought, let the kids take care of me. It's fine. Now, under the streetlights in the mirror, I see how each small act locked into the next like links in a chain meant to hold me. When I got home, I flipped on the kitchen light and pulled out the brown leather notebook Arthur gave me when I retired. I set the pen down and wrote, as if drafting an incident report, March Spencer changed the accountant and created an email to receive the bills himself. May property tax autopay showed up without my signature. June Naomi installed a medication reminder app and kept the password. August Spencer introduced a senior living center. October. At dinner, they tried to mislead me about the day of the week. I added the time, place, people involved, how they spoke, even the tone. I had made hundreds of reports like that throughout my career. Every time an artifact was moved or a document was damaged, I wrote a detailed description. Now, I was building a file on the erosion of trust. I wrote, until near midnight, the desk lamp washing over pages packed with words. My hand ached, but my mind felt strangely clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't writing a journal, I was writing evidence. When I closed the notebook, I looked at the last line. This isn't support. This is a scripted setup for a diminished capacity proceeding. I read the words again. They hurt, but they were accurate. Spencer was no longer just a clumsy son trying to control his mother. He was coached, lawyered up, planned. Naomi was no longer a deft daughter-in-law. She was a witness, a data collector. I leaned back in the chair, listening to the clock tick. In the dim light, the house looked different, not a refuge anymore, but a silent scene. I knew I needed what an archivist always has, a model of action. No emotion, only procedure, no haste, only recording and verification. I pulled a blank sheet from the drawer and set it in the old typewriter, the one Arthur used to write me love. Letters. The keys struck slowly, each letter appearing on the page. Protection, Plan L. Myers. Under that, I bullet-pointed the next steps. Collect all electronic data. Contact the tax office again to confirm authorizations. Create time-stamped copies of every document. No direct confrontation. Don't say anything that could be recorded and used. I finished typing, pulled the page out, folded it in thirds, and slipped it into a sealed envelope. On the front, I handwrote, First sealing, December 13th. When I placed the envelope in the safe, a calm spread through my chest. I was no longer the mother crying behind a door. I was myself again, an archivist who knows how to preserve the truth, even when the truth hurts. Outside, the wind hissed through the window seams. I stood, turned off the lights, and left only the small lamp in the corner, the pale yellow glow reflecting off our old wedding photo of Arthur and me. He was smiling, and I was tilting my head down, holding a bouquet of white lilies. I whispered, Do you see, love? In the end, I'm still doing my job, only this time. The subject under preservation is my own life. I latched the window and drew the curtains. In that small house, there were no more tears, only the soft rustle of paper, the sound of a woman beginning her counterattack, one line, one piece of evidence at a time. I never thought I'd see the day I had to fake confusion. I've spent my life with things that demand precision down to the number and the comma. And yet now, I had to practice forgetting intentionally making mistakes, letting things get messy to convince my own son that his mother was slipping into the dim edges of old age. The next morning, I drove to a small electronics shop on the corner of State Street. The young clerk looked at me, polite but a little unsure when he heard my question. "Do you have a recorder that's really small and doesn't beep when it starts?" He handed me a mini recorder no bigger than a thumb, matte black with a cool metal shell. "This one runs about 4 hours, and the audio's pretty clear. It's easy, just press and hold for 1 second. I nodded, paid cash, and didn't leave any membership info. Walking out, I felt like there was a second heart in my coat pocket, small, silent, always listening. I tested it in the car, pressed and held, saw the red light blink once and disappear. Perfect. No beep, no extra light, only silence, exactly what I needed. The next morning, I started staging forgetfulness. I left the kettle lid popped just enough for steam to fog the stovetop. I set an unopened envelope in the middle of the dining table, next to a half-finished crossword with a few wrong entries, a capless pen rolling on the edge. I even forgot to turn on the heat so the house held a faint chill, the kind that makes anyone walking in think, an absent-minded old lady forgot the thermostat. I opened the curtains to let winter light flood in bright enough for my cabinet camera to catch everything. The house now looked exactly the way they wanted to imagine me, a solitary mother starting to slip. Before leaving the kitchen, I tucked the mini recorder into a seam of my gray wool cardigan, right where an old stitch once was. A slight tilt, and the mic pointed outward. I tried standing, sitting, bending, moving, no sound. Good. Then I left the door unlocked, just as Spencer often scolded me for. "Mom, you forget to lock the door all the time. It's dangerous." This time I'd forget again with a very clear reason. At exactly 10:20, Spencer's car pulled up. I sat at the dining table, wrapped in a thick robe, hair loosely pinned, glasses slipping on my nose. The TV played a vintage show at a whisper. The door opened. "Mom?" His voice was gentle, a little forced. "In the kitchen, honey," I answered, slow and slightly hoarse, just natural enough. It came in with a brown paper bag, the smell of hot soup filling the room. "I brought you chicken soup. Naomi made it. Have you eaten?" "Not yet. I forgot." I looked out the window. He smiled. I recognized that look, half pity, half assessment. Spencer observes the way a man evaluates a product. I let him see every sign he needed, slow, distracted, a little muddled. He set the bag down, poured the soup into a bowl. I reached across the table on purpose and dropped a spoon. Metal hit tile with a crack. I gave a small laugh, shook my head. "See? I'm clumsy. It's okay, Mom. That's why I stopped by," he said, smiling. When we sat, he started exactly as I expected. "How have you been sleeping, Mom?" "Okay. Some mornings I wake up early and then forget what I meant to do," I said, avoiding his eyes. He nodded, eyes flicking to his watch. "Do you remember the insurance letter I sent last week? The one marked policy renewal?" Maybe I put it somewhere," I said, tilting my head and looking around. "Here," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket like a magic trick. "Found it on the table. I can read it to you." "Just a small formality." I smiled. Just a small formality was exactly the signal I'd been waiting for. "Thank you. My eyes aren't great. The print is tiny." He read. Each sentence I captured in my mind like a scanner. He read the parts about adding a co-manager of assets and authorizing representation on behalf of the owner upon signs of cognitive decline. His tone was even, as if it were obvious. When he stopped, I asked softly, feigning hesitation, "So, you're saying I'm about to be not clear-minded enough?" "No, Mom, I just want to be prepared. At this age, everyone should be. Naomi and I only want what's best for you." His voice was as soft as a winter blanket, but each word hit colder than ice. I glanced toward the window where snow drifted past the porch. I murmured, almost to myself, "What day is it again?" Spencer didn't miss a beat. "Wednesday, Mom." "Oh, I thought it was Friday," I said with a shy smile, pretending to forget. "It's okay," he replied. "That's why I've been thinking about a place where you'd be looked after more carefully." Looked after more carefully, it sounded like love and a verdict at once. He started describing a facility with a therapy garden, music, cooking classes, senior chats. His voice was steady, almost as if he were reading from a brochure. I nodded, seeming absent. I dropped the spoon again. Spencer bent to pick it up, his voice light as air. "See? You need help. They have staff there around the clock." I looked at my son, the gentle smile, the tender manner. Underneath it, I saw the trained calculus. They weren't waiting for their mother to grow old, they were building the proof to make her old faster. After lunch, Spencer tidied the dishes. Like a model son, "I'm leaving more soup in the fridge. Eat it over the next couple days." I nodded, pretending to be moved, touched his hand, and said softly, "I'm grateful, sweetheart. You just rest. I'll handle everything." I met his eyes, calm. No anger, no blame. I knew I had captured the entire performance. When the door clicked shut, I sat still, listening to the car pull away. Only when the quiet settled did I stand, slip the tiny recorder from my cardigan, and watch the light blink 3 times, recording complete. I plugged it into the laptop, downloaded the file, replayed a few parts. His voice rang clear, word for word. "Wednesday, Mom. They have staff there around the clock." I saved the file as lunch proposal to relocate, MP3. Next, I opened the encryption app software Marisol had set up for me back in my museum days. I created a new folder. Evidence. Log. 2. Uploaded the audio with this note. Speaker. Spencer Hale. Location. Private residence. Madison, Wisconsin. Time. 12:14 p.m., December 14th. Content. Proposal to relocate and confirmation of memory decline indicators. Then I set a password only I would know, a string tied to the one date no one could guess. The day Arthur proposed. I sat quietly for a while, watching the thin sun angle through the window, lighting the ring left by the hot soup bowl. Everything looked peaceful, but inside this house I knew I'd activated the chain of custody work I'd mastered my whole life, now used to protect me. I spoke to no one but myself, just loud enough to hear, "You want to test me, Spencer? I've archived thousands of documents in my life. Did you think I'd forget how to store one more?" Outside, the snow kept falling. I stood, poured the remaining soup down the drain, steam fogging the glass. Then I wiped every drop away, leaving nothing but calm. When I finished, I switched off the kitchen light, turned, and smiled the smile of a mother who had just completed the first move in a game her son didn't know he was playing. I spent the whole evening staring at audio files, notes, and the to-do list spread across the kitchen table. The warm lamp made the room look like a small courtroom, except the judge, witness, and defendant were all the people I loved most. I knew I couldn't fight alone. I needed someone outside, someone who knew the law better than I did and wouldn't let feelings blur the lines. The name came to me immediately: Marisol Kane. Marisol had been outside counsel for the museum where I worked for over 3 decades. She specialized in contested gifts, cases where old paperwork could shift millions of dollars. I remembered her clearly tall black hair, a stern gaze with a thread of warmth. We'd teamed up on a tangled case in 2009, and she taught me to read legal clauses like sheet music: keep the tempo, hear the subtext, and don't let anyone play a wrong note. I picked up the phone, found her number in my yellowed notebook. I called, but only got voicemail. "You've reached Marisol Kane, Kane and Torres Law. Please leave a message. I inhaled and kept my voice even. Hi, Marisol. This is Loretta Myers. I need to speak with you private and urgent. Not museum-related, but it concerns a will. I know you'll understand. Please call me back. I hung up and sat still. In under 15 minutes, the phone buzzed. Her voice was low and steady. Loretta, are you okay? You sound not quite yourself. I'm okay, but I need to meet. As soon as possible. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., I'll come to your house. I exhaled. One short answer, and I knew she understood and believed me. The next day, I woke early, made coffee, and set the table. I didn't want the house too tidy. I left a few papers unfolded, a few notebooks open as if it were a casual catch-up, not a strategy session to protect my life. At 10 to 3, a black sedan stopped at the curb. Marisol got out, brisk stride, charcoal wool coat, briefcase in hand. Her eyes were the same cool on the surface, warm underneath. Miss Loretta, she said with a small smile. Long time. Yes, I answered, opening the door. Last time might have been the Egyptian gallery opening. And now it seems you're the artifact that needs protecting. The half-joke made me laugh. We sat at the dining table. I didn't ramble, just slid the mini recorder and Arthur's original will across to her. Marisol opened her tablet, plugged in earphones, and listened to the entire recording. I stared out the window while my son's voice played warm, slow, each word sweet to the point of false. When the file ended, she took off the earphones and folded her hands. I understand, she said. You have audio evidence and the original will. That gives us leverage. I don't want to fight, Marisol. I just want to keep my autonomy. And that's exactly what we'll do. She pulled blank forms, a pen, a seal from her case, and spoke like she was reading orders. First, revoke Spencer's power of attorney. I'll draft it now. Then we'll update the will, naming you as sole executor. Finally, we'll notify the Wisconsin registry about the changes. I nodded, not interrupting. Every word was a rung in the ladder I needed to climb out of the hole Spencer dug. Marisol opened her laptop. Fingers quick, as she explained. I'll create a dedicated archive on your machine, named Loretta Legal Private. In it, I'll set up versioning and logs. Every edit will have a timestamp, editor, and storage location. No one can alter anything without leaving a trail. I smiled, like a chain of custody in the museum. Exactly. I learned that from you, she said, half teasing. She finished a form and slid it to me. Revocation of POA for Spencer Hale. I read each line carefully. I, Loretta Myers, of sound mind, hereby revoke all legal representative authority previously granted to Spencer Hale, effective today. Below was the signature line and notary, Marisol Kane. I took the pen. The tip trembled, but I signed decisively. Marisol flipped the seal and stamped one crisp click. A round red mark bloomed on the page, like the ancient seals I once restored. Done, she said. From now on, Spencer has no authority over your property or medical decisions. I sat quiet a moment, feeling an invisible cord loosen from my neck. I only wondered, can a small stamp stop a storm? Do you think that click was fair to Loretta? I'd truly like to hear your perspective in the comments below. Marisol opened her notebook and continued. We need a 3-layer defense. 3? Legal, medical, financial. She held up 3 fingers. 1. Legal, revoke and reestablish all powers of attorney. Update the will. 2. Medical. Obtain an independent letter of cognitive capacity. 3. Financial, reconcile every account. Ensure documentation for each transaction. With all 3, she said, they can't touch you, not with a single signature. I nodded. Like 3 barriers around a priceless artifact. Exactly. You always catch on fast. She went on, I also want you to set up dual backups, one in encrypted cloud, one on a secure USB. This USB will be sealed and lodged in a bank safe deposit box. I'll help you open a dedicated account. No one else can access it. She handed me a small silver USB engraved K and T. Don't keep it here. Spencer can show up anytime. The metal was cold in my palm. In that moment, for the first time, I wasn't afraid. At 4:30, Marisol closed her laptop and poured more tea. Looking over the rim of her cup, her voice softened. Loretta, from now on, every communication, email, text, paper, needs timestamps and copies. Don't say anything off the record, okay? Understood. I used to do that with donor artifacts. Now I'll apply it to my son. We both laughed, but it only covered a deep sadness. Marisol knew it too. To survive, I had to be an observer, not a mother. Before leaving, she wrote a few final lines, tore the page out, and handed it to me. Next Monday, 10 a.m., bank reconciliation. Bring the will, the POA revocation, and ID. I folded the slip into my wallet. She stood, pulled on her coat. I'll draft the letter to the property registry. They'll have it tomorrow. Stay steady. Everything is moving the right way. Thank you, Marisol. Thank you for trusting me. Not everyone can stand up when the attack comes from family. I watched her go, black hair over her shoulders, stride decisive. When her car turned off the street, the headlights swept the snow and left a streak of light that vanished. The house fell quiet again. I sat and looked at the still wet red seal, small ink, strong enough to block a whole scheme. I wrote one more line in the corner. Second sealing, December 15th. I opened my laptop, created a folder named Legal Revocation, and saved all the scans. In the notes, I typed, POA revocation for Spencer Hale, verified by attorney Marisol Kane. Chain of custody. Intact. Archivist habit. I don't skip details, even the way I annotate. When I finished, I plugged in the USB, copied everything, slipped it into a silver envelope, and heat sealed it. On the front I wrote, Backup 01 stored evidence, signed Loretta M. The porch light faded. I brewed chamomile tea and watched the window. Snow covered the fence. The sunset washed the block in pale gold, peaceful to the point of absurd. No one knew that in this small house a quiet war was beginning, and the one holding the weapon was a 65-year-old widow, hands unsteady but mind sharp as a blade. I sipped, letting the heat touch my lips. On the table sat Arthur's original will beside the stamped POA revocation. I snapped a photo and whispered, almost under my breath, Arthur, you'd be proud. This time I won't let anyone sign for me. Outside, the wind scraped the bare maples. Inside, I felt warm, the warmth of a woman who stopped trying to be the good mother and started being the keeper of her own keys. 3 days after meeting Marisol, I woke earlier than usual. The snow lay thicker, whitening the neighbors' roofs and the narrow path to the garage. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching morning light bounce off a thin sheet of ice. The heaviness in me was gone. Each plan was stacking neatly, like the archive boxes I used to shelve at the museum. That morning, I called Dr. Hartley Quinn's clinic. He's been my family doctor for nearly 10 years. He treated Arthur in his final years, a man of few words, careful, with a remarkable memory. I kept it brief. Dr. Quinn, I'd like to schedule a comprehensive cognitive evaluation. Reason, for my personal records. He was a now. Bit surprised but didn't pry. This Friday, 10 a.m. Do you need me to send a template beforehand? No need. I'm familiar with the process. I heard him chuckle softly over the phone. Still as meticulous as ever. All right, Loretta, I'll have the report ready. And I'll bring in 2 witnesses to sign. When I hung up, I realized my hands had stopped shaking. Not because the fear was gone, but because everything was starting to fall into order, as if I were shelving my own life in an archive. I arrived 10 minutes early for the appointment. The small clinic sat on a quiet street next to a flower shop. Inside, the smell of disinfectant mingled with coffee from the automatic machine at the front desk. I filled out the forms, leaving nothing blank. When I stepped into the room, Dr. Quinn looked up from a file and smiled kindly. "I'm guessing Spencer doesn't know about this?" "No," I said. "And I'd like to keep it that way." He nodded immediately, understanding. No further explanation needed. The evaluation lasted nearly an hour and a half. He asked me to recite numbers backward, describe shapes, remember lists of random words, recount recent events. I answered slowly, precisely, without rushing. He moved on to logic tasks and spatial questions. When he asked me to draw a floor plan of my house, I sketched the exact position of each room, window, and even where the afternoon sun falls across the kitchen. Dr. Quinn smiled, nodding along. "If anyone says you're impaired, I want to know what they're basing it on." At the end, he signed the evaluation, stamped it, then brought in 2 witnesses from outside the head nurse and the medical secretary. They read the entire conclusion before signing. No evidence of memory loss, disorientation, or diminished capacity. Assessment: alert, full cognition, judgment and recall stable and appropriate for age. He clipped the papers together and handed them to me. "You should keep this safe. This is your first wall, Loretta." I knew what he meant. The first wall was legal proof of capacity. This would block any temporary guardianship filing Spencer might try. Back home, I hung my coat on the hook and set the document bag on the table. Afternoon light slanted through the window and reflected off the wooden surface where I'd already laid out files, recordings, the POA revocation, and the original will. I opened a cabinet and pulled out 2 old document boxes, the kind I used at the museum, and started the familiar work, sorting and indexing. I gathered all receipts, printed emails, bank statements, and my handwritten notes, each one a piece of evidence of consistent conduct. A person losing her mind couldn't store, annotate, and systematize dozens of documents with this kind of logic. I split them into 3 groups: legal, POA, will, notarized papers, letters of confirmation from Marisol; medical, records from Dr. Quinn, prescriptions, test results, the cognitive assessment; personal, letters, receipts, notebooks, work calendars, notes on spending and transactions. I labeled each set with colored tabs: red, blue, yellow. Just like I used to classify wartime artifacts, clear, verifiable, and impossible to scramble. At dusk, I powered up the scanner. Its familiar startup hum thumped steadily like a heartbeat. I scanned everything, assigning each file its own document code and timestamp in date order. 2020 FIV-12-18 MED QN Assessment PDF. 2020 FIV-12-18 Leg POA Revocation PDF. 2025-12-18 PRS Receipts Batch 1 PDF. I created a descriptive guide with notes, a finding aid for my own life. The scope read, Archival Purpose, to demonstrate the subject Loretta Myers's clarity, logic, and autonomous behavior. When I finished, the screen listed nearly 70 files. I sat and looked at the tidy lines of text, each one a piece of evidence for the fact of my existence, not just as a mother, but as a fully competent legal person. I moved everything into the Loretta Legal Private folder Marisol helped me set up. Then I downloaded Dr. Quinn's digital certificate and attached it to the assessment. The system displayed, Digital Signature Verified, Dr. Hartley, Quinn, MD. I smiled. The monitor's glow reflected off my glasses, glinting like metal on a red seal. Next, I emailed Marisol. Simple subject line. Subject: Cognitive evaluation completed attachment. Certified assessment. PDF. Message. Attached. Cognitive exam report. Certified with witnesses. Backed up in private folder. Proceeding with financial reconciliation. LM. After sending, I added a line to my journal. December 18th completed the second defense layer, medical. That evening, I tidied the desk. The file set sat neatly in clear plastic boxes. I put a large label on the outside. Archive, Loretta Myers, evidence of capacity. On the lid, I added with a great Myers. Marker: each file is a brick in the wall against the image of the forgetful mother. I read it aloud. It sounded like a vow. Around 8, Marisol texted, "Received. Excellent, Loretta." I've never had a client archive her own case this thoroughly. I replied, "Just habit from the job. Keep that habit. One day, it'll be what saves you." I set the phone down and poured myself a small glass of wine, the kind Arthur liked in winter. The amber color shone clear. I lifted it and spoke into the quiet. "This one's for you, Arthur. You always said I had a camera for a memory. Turns out that memory is what's keeping me from being erased." After cleaning up, I walked to the door to check the lock out of old habit. This time, my hand stopped halfway. I smiled and let it fall. No need to check anymore. I turned off the living room lights and left the small desk lamp on. Its warm glow fell across the clear file boxes like the lights in an old exhibit case where artifacts sit safe behind thick glass. Only now, the artifact I was preserving wasn't clay or parchment, it was my own lucidity. I walked down the hall and brushed a finger across our wedding photo. In it, Arthur was smiling, eyes full of trust as he looked at me. "Don't worry," I whispered. "No one gets to rewrite my story anymore." That night, I slept straight through. No hallway light, no waking to check the lock or the clock. Sleep came soft as an instrumental, and in my dream I sat in a vast archive, boxes lined up around me, each one a guarded memory, each paper a brick in the wall of freedom. After Marisol's congratulatory message that I now had 3 perfect layers of defense, I didn't celebrate. On the contrary, I knew the most dangerous phase is when the other side senses they're losing control. I had a feeling Spencer wouldn't wait long to test me. The next morning, I was up early. Madison's sky was a muted gray, and a chill seeped through the window frames. I pulled a wooden chair onto the front porch, Spencer's usual spot to take calls when he visited. He never discussed private matters inside, always wanting to keep things quiet for Mom. As it turned out, that habit would be the perfect weak point. I opened Arthur's old toolbox and took out a screwdriver, electrical tape, and a mini microphone Marisol had included in the evidence kit. The mic was smaller than a shirt button and could connect to my phone via Bluetooth. I tucked it under the red geranium pot, right at the porch rail where Spencer likes to lean his elbow when he calls. At that angle, the mic was hidden and perfectly placed for clear sound. I checked the signal. The light flashed blue once and went dark. The test came through my earbud. Sparrows, wind over the porch, and even my heartbeat. I smiled. Perfect. I staged a new set of forgetful signs, just enough to lower Spencer's guard, not enough to raise suspicion. On the kitchen table, I left the sugar jar lid open. On the shelf, a notebook tilted with a few dog-eared pages. I didn't turn on the heat, even though it was only in the mid-30s. To outsiders, those details are symptoms, but to me, they're visual traps. At 10 a.m., Spencer arrived, just as I expected. He didn't knock. He eased the door open and called out, "Mom, I'm coming in." I sat at the dining table in a thick sweater, steam curling from my tea. "Oh, Spencer, you're early." "I had an errand nearby and stopped in. Brought you some materials." I glanced at the brown leather folder he placed on the table. The label read, Silver Pines Care Residence Admissions Info. Just reading it chilled me. He sat across from me, voice calm, like we were discussing summer plans. Mom, we just want you to be safe. Staff there is on duty 24 hours. Private rooms, a therapy garden, even an art class. I feigned hesitation. Sounds nice, I guess. But I'm fine, Spencer. I know, it's just to be prepared. You know you've been a bit forgetful lately. He smiled lightly, voice like a breeze. I knew behind each prepared was a fully drafted guardianship plan. I nodded, picked up the brochure, and acted confused. While I read, he stood, took out his phone, and stepped onto the porch right on cue. I stayed calm, sipped my tea, and opened the recorder app on my phone. The porch mic was already live. The door clicked softly. Then Spencer's voice carried from the porch, each word crisp. Yes, Rudy, I brought the materials to my mom. Yeah, I think she's slipping. Just look at how she leaves stuff everywhere. A pause. Right, file the urgent evaluation. If we move fast, we could get a temporary order next week. Each urgent evaluation sliced like a blade. He dropped his voice, strategy mode. Just cite Wisconsin Statute 742.2, the temporary diminished. Capacity provision. I'll provide observational evidence. She keeps forgetting the neighbor's name. Missing appointments, that's enough. No need for another exam, just record it. I closed my eyes. My heart beat steady but deep. Every word, capacity, temporary guardianship, observational evidence, scraped like metal on glass. The mic had all of it. He chuckled softly. Good, Rudy, I trust you. Get the file ready. I'll sign before it goes out. The door opened. Spencer walked back in just as I was still turning the brochure pages. Who was that, honey? I asked casually. Oh, just Rudy, a colleague. Don't worry, he's good. Sounded important. No, Mom, just some routine paperwork. He smiled, packed up the folder, and kissed my forehead. Rest, okay? I'll call you later. The door closed. I heard the engine start and fade. Only quiet remained. I took a long breath and stepped onto the porch. The tiny mic sat snug, behind the geranium pot. I disconnected it, lifted it out, and wiped it with a cloth. Small as it was, it had just captured a conversation worth my entire life. I plugged it into the laptop and downloaded the audio. 17+ minutes, clear enough to hear snow crunch under Spencer's shoes. I replayed it, marked sections, and noted timestamps and keywords. Capacity, 0 hours, 4 minutes, and 11 seconds. Temporary guardianship, 0 hours, 5 minutes, and 27 seconds. Observational evidence, 0006. 43, I saved it as patio call Spencer Rudy Carr, MP3. Then I copied it to the silver USB and uploaded an encrypted version to the cloud around 7 p.m. Marisol arrived with her laptop and a thick file bag. I got your message. Looks like he just handed us evidence against himself. I nodded. The mic caught everything. She opened the laptop and sampled a few clips. Her face stayed composed, but her eyes flashed. Perfect. This is the missing piece. We don't need to speak now. Let the records speak. We sat under the warm light. Marisol extracted the file and cross-checked each line with the brochure Spencer brought. She pointed to the fine print under pre-admission evaluation. Capacity assessment may be requested by a temporary guardian. She said quietly, he wasn't just trying to place you in a facility. He was positioning himself as the legal guardian, with full access to your assets and medical records. I listened, silent. In my mind, I saw Spencer on the porch, voice steady, discussing his mother like an administrative case. Marisol pulled a thick, tabbed packet from her bag, split into 4 color-coded sections. This is the counterfile. I'm submitting it in person tomorrow with a signed receipt. I reviewed it carefully. 1. POA revocation stamped December 15th. 2. Updated will naming me sole executor, notarized. 3. Dr. Quinn's medical certification original, with 2 witnesses. 4. Notice invalidating all prior documents, including anything Spencer has filed. She said, I'll deliver it directly to Rudy Carr's office and require his signed acknowledgement. From that moment, any further action on their part will be considered unlawful interference. I nodded, feeling my shoulders lighten. Marisol, if I didn't have you. If you didn't have me, you'd still manage, she cut in, smiling. I'm just helping you speak the right language. The backbone is yours. We listened to the recording one more time. Spencer's last line rang clear. Get the file ready. I'll sign before it goes out. Marisol hit pause and said, We'll make that the opening line of our response. Her typing was so fast I could barely keep up. The keys clicked steadily, with wind hissing outside. I watched her hands confident, precise, not a single wasted motion. By close to 10, everything was ready. Marisol sealed the packet in a thick envelope and wrote in bold red, Deliver by hand, Kane and Torres. Law firm. Attention. Rudy Carr. She stood and put on her coat. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'll stand in front of him. And I want to see his face when he realizes it was all recorded. I don't need to hear what he says, I answered. I just need him to know I'm still clear. She smiled. You're more than clear, Loretta. You just built a fortress out of paper and there isn't a wall Spencer can climb. The door shut behind her. I watched the car lights fade into the night. The house went quiet again, leaving only the wind scraping across the porch where that tiny mic had been. I turned off the lights and sat alone. The Silver Pines Care residence brochure still lay on the table, elderly faces smiling stiffly in printed sunshine. I drew a line through the words, feels like home. Home? I muttered. No, Spencer. My real home is here, and you just let it speak for me. I saved one last copy of the audio, attached it to the black. Patio, call, final file, and set a new password. Then I shut down the computer and looked around the warm, bright room, feeling as if I'd just closed the door on a case. I didn't need to shout or agonize. I let the file speak. And in the world of law and evidence, that's a voice no one can dismiss. 2 days after Marisol filed our response, I woke to a different kind of morning, not because the snow had thinned, but because the house was so quiet I could hear the wall clock counting each beat. It felt like the air after a storm, when you can still smell the electricity. Everything stands still, but you know something is shifting far away. Around 9 a.m., the landline rang. The caller ID read, Marisol Kane. Her voice was low, a little hoarse from lack of sleep. Loretta, good news. Rudy Carr called me this morning, and he withdrew. I froze, half believing. Withdrew? You mean, he no longer represents Spencer, he said word for word. I'm stepping away from this matter for personal and ethical reasons. I stayed silent a moment, listening to Marisol shuffle papers. That's not all, she said. He sent me an overnight envelope. Inside is a complete copy of everything Spencer's been building for 6 months, draft guardianship petitions, email exchanges, even a template for neighbor observation statements. I'm on my way to bring it to you. When Marisol arrived, I made hot coffee and set out 2 mugs. She didn't smile as usual. She laid the envelope down, eyes turning serious. This isn't just evidence, Loretta. It's a map of your son's last 6 months. I opened it. The familiar smell of paper and toner rose up. I've handled thousands of historical documents, but no sheet has ever felt this cold. The first page was Spencer's email to Carr. I'm concerned my mother is showing cognitive issues. She forgets bills and mixes up the neighbor's name. I think we need an independent medical assessment to protect the family assets. I stared at, to protect the family assets, polished, polite, and perfectly ruthless. Next was the draft petition. Under supporting evidence, Spencer listed repetitive behavior, asking the same question in a day, negligence indicators, leaving the door unlocked, forgetting a boiling kettle. Neighbor concerns, Mrs. Helen Briggs reportedly saw Loretta wandering around the yard. I lifted a corner of my mouth. Helen Briggs? The 82-year-old who slipped on my front steps and whom I bandaged before calling an ambulance. Now she was a witness. Marisol flipped further. Look at this part. It was an internal memo from Carr to Spencer suggesting a soft strategy, create a sympathetic image, use the wife, Naomi, as a bridge. Keep every conversation centered on safety, caring for Mom, remembering how healthy she used to be. Introduce the concept of long-term care gradually. Avoid the crass term guardianship until the final step. It felt like the room was being slowly drained of air. Those words, I had heard them already. They were Naomi's lines at dinners and quiet afternoons by my side, her voice gentle. Mom, we just want you safe. Silver Pines has light yoga, a doctor on nights. You won't have to worry about anything. Every phrase, every cadence exactly as drafted here. I looked down at the end where Carr had underlined, language must be gentle and familiar, avoiding confrontation. Gradually steer toward the capacity evaluation. I set the paper down, feeling my throat tighten. Marisol, do you see it? Even the lines that sound caring are a script. I see it, she said, her voice cold as steel. And Carr, the man who wrote that script, has just taken himself out of the cast. Inside the envelope was a short, handwritten note from Rudy Carr, the letters slightly shaky, the ink a pale blue. Mrs. Myers, I know Arthur saved me from losing my job in 1991. He gave me a chance when no one else would. I owe him a debt. When I took this case, I didn't realize the person being evaluated for capacity was his wife. I made a mistake. Please accept this as an apology and as my withdrawal. Enclosed are full copies of the file. I will take no further legal action related to Spencer Hale. Respectfully, Rudy Carr. I finished reading and couldn't speak. Marisol stayed quiet, giving me time to swallow each word. Part of me wanted to be angry, to shout that Carr was just washing his hands because he was losing, but another part understood cracks in a person sometimes only show when the light hits just right. And that light, strangely enough, came from a memory of Arthur. I folded the letter and set it beside the note Arthur had written to me in the will. Do not grant full authority to our son without an independent evaluation. 2 pieces of paper, 2 men, one who had tried to erase me from my own life, and one who, even gone, happened to shine the truth back into focus. Marisol pulled her laptop closer and drafted a formal warning to Spencer. Her voice was even and firm. I'll send this by both email and certified mail with return receipt. I glanced at the subject line. Subject. Notice of intent. Potential elder coercion under Wisconsin Statute 46.9. Below was a clear, concise paragraph. Any action, direct or indirect, to reinitiate a guardianship petition or to collect evidence beyond the scope of consent will be treated as elder coercion. All documents have been lodged with the Dane County Court with timestamps. Any further steps will be handled as criminal conduct. Marisol signed and hit send. The ping of a sent message sounded, final as a gavel strike. Now you just wait, she said. But not the passive kind of waiting. This is active waiting. The file is doing the work for you. I looked at her and nodded slowly. I understand. I'm not afraid of silence anymore. That afternoon, snow fell again. I cleared the table and stacked the documents neatly. In the dim light, Carr's envelope and Arthur's note lay side by side. I didn't know whether to call this a victory or simply justice showing its face, but I knew this. I was steady. Not because of a lawyer's power or any fancy tech, but because I'd stopped believing that being a mother meant swallowing it forever. I opened my notebook and wrote the last line of the day. December 22nd, attorney Carr withdrew. The file is sealed. The wall is built. I closed the notebook and took a deep breath. The early tremors were gone. What remained was the quiet of someone who knows she has done the right thing. As night came, I stood at the window and watched snow thicken on the neighbors' roofs. The light reflected off the ice in a long, thin streak like a crack across glass. But not every crack is something to fear. Some cracks appear so the light can get through. I whispered, as if to Arthur and to myself, I didn't win, but I stood firm. And that's enough. Passive waiting ended there. From now on, I was no longer the mother waiting to hear, I'm sorry. I was the legal guardian of myself. The next afternoon, with half the snow melted, I was wiping down the old wooden cabinet when I heard the familiar engine outside the gate. No horn, no warning, just a car door slamming, hard and final. I knew at once Spencer. He came into the house without his usual confidence. Coat still on, a folder clamped under his arm, fingers rigid like he was holding something that could break. I recognized that posture. It was exactly how Arthur looked when he signed the last contract of his life, realizing he'd been betrayed by the person he trusted. Mom. His voice was low and rough, stripped of sweetness. I set the cloth down and poured myself a warm mug of spiced apple cider, the scent of cinnamon, mingled with oak from the kitchen, calling up old Christmases. I poured a second mug and slid it toward him. Sit, Spencer. In this cold, have something warm. He stood a few beats, then sat, reluctantly, still hugging the folder. I set the mug before him, then opened the cabinet and brought out 4 packets Marisol had helped me prepare. I placed each one on the table, gently, like laying out exhibits at trial. 1. Revocation of POA notarized. 2. Updated will, naming me as sole executor. 3. Capacity certification signed by Dr. Hartley Quinn with 2 witnesses. 4. Affidavit confirming all filings made and verified. I didn't circle around it. Spencer, I know what you want to ask. Before you speak, you need to understand, everything you see here is my lawful decision. No one can replace it. He looked down at the packets and stayed quiet. His shoulders locked. His eyes scanned the room, as if searching for signs of who helped me, Naomi, Marisol, someone. But I sat still, fingers laced, calm. Mom. His voice rasped, like he meant to argue, then stalled. I met my son's eyes. Spencer, I know what you're thinking. You believe someone put me up to this, don't you? But you're forgetting something. Before I was your mother, I was a keeper of evidence. My work is to keep the truth intact no matter who tries to edit it. This time, I'm just doing my job. The air in the room was thick and still enough to hear the clock. He glanced down the hall, toward the kitchen, toward the corner where I keep my notebook. Maybe he was hunting for the other hand at play, but there was nothing except what I had carefully arranged. Mom, don't lie anymore. I cut in, soft but firm. I'm not angry, I'm just tired of your performance. He frowned. You think I'm performing? I lifted the mug and turned it slightly. If you weren't, why was there a draft ready? Why does the word concerns in your email match Naomi's phrasing word for word? Why would someone I taught to write his name first now try to sign away my rights? He didn't answer. His eyes dropped to the floorboards. His hand shook a little on the folder. Mom, he said quietly, I thought I was protecting you. I smiled sadly. Protecting me by locking me up? A long silence stretched. I let it. Sometimes silence is the clearest mirror. I spoke again, steady as if reading a record. My silence these past months wasn't weakness, Spencer. It was observation. I listened, recorded, and kept it all. And I understand this. When someone fears losing control, they'll turn another person into the one who's incompetent just to feel safe. He looked up, lips parting to object, but my eyes held him. I poured a little more cider and nudged the mug toward him again. "You're still my son, but I won't sign anything else with your name on the representative line. From today on, every decision house, accounts, medical files will bear my signature." I slid Dr. Quinn's certification closer. "The doctor confirms I am fully competent. You can call him. He'll tell you exactly this. She remembers the small stories of her life better than I remember my prescriptions." He looked at the signature and seal, then back at me. "Did you do all this just to beat me?" "No," I said, gently. "I did it to stand firm." Spencer didn't respond. He opened his folder and took out a few papers, old copies, probably a half-drafted guardianship petition. He flipped for a while, then closed it. His hand dropped, eyes landing on the cover of the new will. "Mom, I don't know what Naomi has told you." But I raised a hand, stopping him. "It wasn't Naomi. I found it myself." "You were tracking me?" "No. You left a trail." I said it without malice, simply as a fact. He knew I wasn't lying. After a long moment, Spencer stood, no slamming, no shouting, no argument. He folded the folder he'd brought and set it back on the table right beside the revoked POA. He didn't crease it, didn't tear it, didn't throw it. He just left it there. I didn't stop him. We looked at each other one last time, the look of two people who once shared blood, now quietly admitting that something between them had broken. He turned away. When the door opened, cold air rushed in, carrying snow and the sound of footsteps fading. I stayed where I was. The cider steamed in front of me. I reached over and switched off the tiny recorder hidden under the ashtray. The red light went dark. On the screen, an autosave flashed. "Conversation clean copy." I replayed the ending to confirm it had all been captured. My voice was calm, clear, never above what was needed. Spencer's voice, when it fell silent, sounded like the gap between two breaths. I saved the file under Confrontation Final, then got up, cleared the mugs, and boxed. The papers. That night, the snow quit. I sat by the window, looking out at the porch where the mic had once been the stage for scheming and for conversations. Only the wind moved the geranium pots now. I turned off every light but the one in my study. In a hazy dream, I saw myself in a bright room, boxes neatly labeled, ledgers clean, windows open, no shadows in the hall, no breath on my neck. Just me sitting in that room, one hand on the will, and a simple, deep feeling spreading. The right to decide had returned to its owner. And for me, that was enough. A week after that final conversation with Spencer, my house settled into a new rhythm, no longer strung tight, not quite peaceful yet. In that in-between, someone new arrived, carrying youthful breath and the precision of the digital age. Her name was Ava Kane, Marisol's niece, a senior in information and archival science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Marisol called me on Monday morning, her voice light, like he was suggesting something simple. "Miss Loretta, my niece wants a winter practicum. She studies archives, and you've got a data trove that needs security and order. Win-win." I laughed. "You rang the right bell. I've lived my whole life among files and seals." "Perfect. Let her stay a few weeks. She'll help you and learn what the textbooks don't teach." That afternoon, Ava arrived. A slim girl with dark brown hair, round glasses, a gray puffer coat. She carried 2 laptop bags and a small box labeled "External Drives Confidential." Her eyes were bright, a little shy, but her voice was sure. "I'm Ava. Thank you for letting me stay. Aunt Marisol said to call you Mrs. Myers, but if it's okay, I'd rather say Miss Loretta." I smiled. "Just Loretta." No formalities here. From the day Ava moved into the upstairs room, the house changed its breathing. Mornings, instead of the old radio, I heard keyboard taps from the study. She set up university-grade security, 3 layers of encryption, a local server, and a standardized naming convention for everything. I sat nearby, watching and warming inside like seeing a first student carefully label boxes in a museum. Ava tilted her head and asked, "Should I use ISO convention or keep it short like you do?" For example, 2025 Case Myers, Evidence 1. PDF or Myers Ev 1. Use ISO, I said. Dates are the quiet proof of continuity. Order doesn't lie. She grinned. I love how you put that order doesn't lie. I might borrow it for my paper. I didn't answer, just smiled. In her voice I heard energy. I'd lost a belief that if things are put in the right place, the world can be kinder. By noon, Ava had reset the desk, added 2 large monitors, and docked the drives. She printed colored labels for albums, legal, medical, personal, media evidence. Each folder carried a changelog, a small sheet noting who edited, when, and why. "Loretta," she asked, "may I digitize your paper notebooks? I won't change anything, just scan to searchable PDFs." I looked up and thought a beat. "Do it, but keep the originals. Real memory has its own smell, you can't compress that." Ava nodded hard. At school they teach that the physics of paper is part of the context. I like how you say it. Real memory has its own smell. In the afternoon, the scanner's hum and keystrokes blended into an easy rhythm like background music for a house that had known only the clock for too long. When Ava printed labels, the little printer's cadence reminded me of Arthur's old typewriter in the 1980s when he wrote his thesis. I watched her small hands fly and suddenly saw Arthur's shape double-exposed him by the window, typing with all 10 fingers, murmuring lines about history and time. For a moment I realized what I lost had returned in a different form. At dinner, Ava ate with me at the kitchen table. I made potato stew. She brought garlic, toast. Midway through, the house phone rang. Spencer Hale lit up on the screen. I watched it glow and said nothing. Ava paused, spoon in midair. "Do you want me to—" "No, let it ring." The tone stretched and died. A moment later, voicemail blinked. I didn't press play. I didn't need to. "Aunt Marisol says," Ava murmured, "when someone tries to control your story, the best thing is not to react too fast." "She's right," I said. Silence is an answer, too. The next day, Ava pulled me out to the garage. I hadn't stepped there in years-old boxes, Arthur's things, keepsakes, letters gone yellow. "I want to label them. Every box deserves a name," she said, excited. "Not afraid of dust?" "Dust is evidence, too, Miss Loretta." We both laughed. 2 women, 2 generations, sat amid old wood smells and a bald bulb's weak light. Ava wrote labels: Arthur's research, family letters, travel 1989. She asked every detail: what paper Arthur liked, what ink, how he filed. I told her, my voice lighter without my knowing. He always used pale blue ink. Said darker ink hid the sadness in the words. "That's sad and beautiful," Ava whispered, eyes bright. By dusk, the garage was less chaotic. The boxes now had names and stood in straight rows. Ava dusted her hands and smiled. "See? When things are called by their real names, they line up on their own. And when a person's heart is called by its real name," I said softly, "it settles too." That night the house wasn't as still. The rhythm of Ava's typing upstairs mixed with page turns and the wind brushing the window. Each small sound made the house feel like it was breathing again. In the kitchen, a tea stain dried on the table. Once I would have wiped it at once. Now I left it. On the floor, a few label scraps waited to be swept. The house wasn't pristine, but it was alive. Ava sat on the stairs and smiled. You know, I read a journal line you wrote years ago. The house is as quiet as a museum. Now I think your museum has visitors. I laughed, and for the first time in months, it didn't feel forced. Before bed, I opened my journal. A fresh page, the paper scented faintly of pine. I used blue ink the color Arthur loved. December 29th. Ava arrived. The house isn't still anymore. Neither am I. There's the sound of keys, the scent of tea, motes of dust floating in the light. Someone asks my opinion about naming rules. Someone laughs between the whir of a fan. And I realize living isn't just guarding files from deletion. Living is leaving fingerprints on the table, the cup, the paper to prove we touched this life. I set the pen down and closed the journal. Light from Ava's room spilled under her door. The steady tapping sounded like Arthur's typewriter played by different hands in a different age. I whispered almost a prayer. Thank you, Ava. And thank you, Arthur, because of you. I'm still learning how to go on. The house rested in warm light, a little noisy, a little messy, full of human presence. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was guarding an archive. I was living in it where every document, voice, and breath blended into the only evidence that matters. I'm still here. Thursday morning, my phone chimed. A text from Naomi, the daughter-in-law who once said sweetly, "You just need to rest." Mom, I'm sorry for everything. I just want to talk once, to clear the misunderstandings. We truly only wanted what's best for you. I read it over and over, feeling equal parts irony and sadness. What's best? The phrase people use when they're trying to control someone. But I didn't refuse. I knew I needed to see them not for revenge, but for closure. I replied briefly. 3 p.m., the old diner on Maple Street. They have cameras. My treat. That diner was where I took Spencer whenever he scraped a knee or failed at school. We used to sit at the second booth by the window. I'd order him toast and vanilla ice cream. Now, I chose it again as a reminder. No past is erased. People just try to forget. At 10 to 3, I arrived first and took the old seat. The window still had a frosted film, sunlight sliding across the table in a bright stripe. I ordered black coffee and rested my hand on my purse inside, a USB drive and a copy of the old pledge. When Naomi came in, she wore a light knit coat, hair pulled back, worry flickering in her eyes beneath a practiced smile. Mom. Sit down, Naomi. Spencer followed, silent. He didn't look at me, just pulled out a chair. No one ordered more. Time in the diner seemed to stall. Naomi started, voice soft, trying for honest. Mom, really, we just wanted to make sure everything was safe. You live alone. Your health is unstable. We were afraid if something happened. I cut in not sharply, just tilted my head slightly. Safe for whom? Naomi? For me? Or for my retirement account? She flinched, then quickly regained her composure. No, it's not like that. It's just, Rudy Carr said if we finish the paperwork early then. She stopped mid-sentence. I saw Spencer's shoulders tense, but Naomi had already slipped. Then what? I asked slowly. Then, there would be support from the Elder Care Fund. A portion of the fees is reimbursed if the person under guardianship has personal assets. The words dropped like a stone. I didn't need any more proof. A bonus for finishing early, that's what they called, stripping a living, lucid person of her autonomy. I didn't react. I didn't slam the table or shed a tear. I just looked at them as if they were two figures in a case file I'd just closed. Thank you for telling the truth, I said evenly. I think that's enough for today. I picked up my wallet, left money for the bill, and stood. Naomi reached for my hand, but I stepped. Back half a pace, gentle, final. Don't call this filial piety. You can't claim to love someone while drafting a plan to take their rights." Then I walked out. I didn't look back. Chairs scraped behind me, but I didn't stop. Outside, the cold wind slapped my face, the kind of cold that wakes you up. That evening, I told Marisol everything. She listened in silence, eyes far away, then said, "Miss Loretta, I think we should give them a chance to stop. If they'll apologize and end every legal move, we won't sue. Because in the end, your goal isn't to win." I nodded. "Right. The goal is to live in peace in my own home." Marisol drafted a settlement proposal. If Spencer and Naomi sign a commitment to cease all guardianship efforts, apologize in writing, and refrain from any future financial interference, you will not file suit. We'll lodge the minutes with the court for the record, but not publicly. 3 days later, Carr sent a letter. Not from Spencer, from him, the former attorney. "Mrs. Myers, I hereby terminate all representation of Spencer Hale and Naomi Hale. I have advised them to withdraw and accept reconciliation. I ask that you consider closing this matter with the generosity I once saw in your husband." I read the letter, set it on the table, and felt a strange lightness, like when an old door falls shut after a gust of wind. That afternoon, the settlement meeting took place in Marisol's small office. The room was bright, simple, with cream-colored walls. Naomi sat across from me, eyes red, silent. Spencer beside her, hands clenched, looking tired. Marisol read each clause aloud, clear and precise. Clause 3. The respondents commit not to initiate or assist in any legal, financial, or medical action related to Mrs. Loretta Myers' representation without her written consent. I looked at Spencer. He kept his head down, said nothing. Final clause, Marisol continued. The respondents acknowledge overreach, commit to respecting Mrs. Myers' personal decisions, and sign to confirm. Pens touched paper. The sound was small, but it rang in me like a closing cadence. Naomi signed first, then Spencer. He glanced up for a moment, ready to speak, but my gaze kept him quiet. No anger left, just fatigue with a trace of pity. I understood. Fear of loss, of lack, of not being loved had driven them to cruelty. I signed last, lightly, decisively. "Done," Marisol said, closing the file and stamping the confirmation. Naomi stood, bowed her head, and murmured, "I'm sorry, Mom." I answered, "I heard you." No hug, no tears, only silence, the kind with no resentment and no expectation. That evening I went home. Ava was labeling the last boxes in the garage. She looked up and smiled. "All done, ma'am? Everything okay?" I smiled, set my bag down. "Okay. The file is closed." I went upstairs to my study and opened the safe. I changed the code 3. New numbers with no link to anyone's birthday. I took out the new will and added one final line under the executor. Executor, Dane County Women's Scholarship Fund, designated by Loretta Myers. I didn't want my estate to become a tool for fights. I wanted it to become opportunity for girls like I once was, caught between a dream and a duty. When I finished, I sealed it, signed, and dated it. January 14th. Final revision. No further amendments. I closed the safe, sat down, and breathed slowly. No sense of triumph, no glee, just the quiet of someone who has restored her right to be left in peace. Ava brought up 2 cups of tea, faint orange blossom drifting in the air. "Ma'am, is it really over now?" "Yes. And the funny thing is, it didn't end with shouting, it ended with signatures." She smiled, setting the cup beside me. "A peaceful ending is also a win, Miss Loretta." I looked at the tea, steam fogging faintly, and said softly, "Maybe. But what I value more than winning is that I no longer have to prove I have a good memory. I just need to live as someone who deserves to be trusted." Ava nodded. Outside, the early spring wind brushed the maples by the porch. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a fortress, it felt like a home. I opened my notebook and wrote the day's last line. Let them speak first, then watch the truth stand up on its own. When I finished, I dotted the pen and closed the book. It felt like completing a dossier kept for a lifetime, nothing left to add, nothing left to hide. At noon, Ava tapped on the door, face bright, eyes a little pink. Ma'am, I just got an email from school. They approved my thesis on preserving personal archives in private families. I'm going to use your system as a case study. I laughed and pulled her into a long hug. Good, Ava. This house may be small, but it holds more than you think. She smiled softly. When this term ends, I'll come back to finish the finding aid for the Myers family collection. I promise. I'll be waiting. I watched her pack up the laptop, folding each cable carefully. The room went quiet, but it was the kind of quiet with a heartbeat. I knew part of my story had traveled beyond these walls into books, classrooms, and maybe into the life of someone who's never met me. Toward evening, I opened the safe and took out 2 envelopes. One was the letter from Rudy Carr, the man who nearly turned me into a case, but withdrew in silence. The other was Arthur's handwritten note, the ink still faintly blue. If the day comes when our son makes you doubt yourself, remember you see more clearly than you believe. I set them side by side, tied them with an old ribbon, and placed them in a wooden box. I whispered, 2 lessons, one about people, one about light. Then I locked the box and set it on the highest shelf, not to hide it, but to remind myself that once truth is lit, it doesn't need guarding. That night, I did something many would find hard. I invited Spencer to dinner. I didn't text Naomi. I sent my son a single line. I'm cooking your favorite. If you're free, come by tonight. He arrived late, carrying a cheap bottle of wine, not saying much. I greeted him with a gentle smile. On the table, I had set 2 clean silver spoons, bright and polished. No mention of the past, no court, no agreements. I just poured warm apple cider and told a small story. Once you asked why I worked at the museum. I said because I don't want the truth forgotten. Now I understand something else. Sometimes truth needs forgiveness to rest. Spencer was quiet. He stared into his cup, hand tightening and loosening. I didn't need an apology. That silence was enough. We ate and talked about the weather, about the new neighbors. Dinner passed slowly, lightly, without bitterness. At the door, before he left, Spencer said softly, "Thank you for still letting me into the house." I answered, breath light. "This door was never locked, Spencer. I just needed time to hold the key." He nodded, said nothing more. When his car slipped past the maples, I closed the door not to shut him out, but to keep the night wind from coming in. I sat at the table and poured another cup of tea. The porch light shimmered through the window, steady and warm. Inside me was a quiet unlike those first days, not silence from fear, but the peace of someone who has said her piece. I thought of them all, Arthur, Carr, Marisol, Ava, and Spencer. Each one a tile in the larger mosaic, the one I once feared would never be complete. Now I knew it was never missing anything. It just needed time for me to see it clearly. I opened my journal one last time and wrote a few final lines. If someone has ever made you doubt yourself, remember that dignity doesn't need permission. If they call you weak, let time show you were simply preparing to stand, steadier. And if you ever feel alone, remember truth has its own strength, and it will rise when it's time. I set down the pen and closed the book, the spine clicking softly, a small, decisive sound, like the final seal in a registrar's life. Outside, the sky was turning pale blue. Ava texted from campus, "Ma'am, when I submit the thesis, I'll write, 'Dedicated to Loretta Myers, who taught me that order is not silence.'" I laughed out loud, my heart light as a freshly signed page. I turned off the light, opened the window, and let the night air in, listening to the soft hum of insects in the yard. Life has never been easy, but at least now I'm living it my way in my house, with my memories, and even with the mistakes I've forgiven. And if you've listened this far, maybe you know that feeling too when someone doubts you, belittles your voice, or makes you wonder if you're still trustworthy. I just want to tell you, dignity needs no permission. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's enough to stand up and guard your small truth, and the light will be enough to fill the room. If this story touched you, let me know which city you're listening from. Every comment reminds me I'm not alone. Thank you for staying to the end, and if you'd like, please like, subscribe, or catch the next story. I'll be here with you on quiet evenings just like this.